With a life of simple food and high thinking, coupled with high morals and chaste conduct, one needs no tonics. Very often, persons complain that they do not seem to progress on the path, but little do they realize that it is due to faulty diet and wrong living. Please continue watching for the spiritual and karmic aspects of the vegetarian diet by Sant Kirpal Singh and Baba Sawan Singh, Vegetarians, Part 1 of 2.
Namaste is how you would be greeted if you visit India. It means hello in Hindi, one of the official languages of the Republic. Kind viewers, I am Sanvi. The hospitable people of India wish your lives to be filled with the miraculous presence of the divine. Welcome to the Spiritual and Karmic Aspects of the Vegetarian Diet by Sant Kirpal Singh and Baba Sawan Singh, Vegetarian Part 1 of 2 on Words of Wisdom. Baba Sawan Singh Ji was an Indian saint and enlightened master. Born in 1858, he was a bright and virtuous youth whose studies in engineering led him to be a successful sub-divisional officer in the government. From an early age, Sardar Sawan Singh Ji pored over the scriptures of various religions, met pilgrims, and constantly yearned for God. A holy Sufi ascetic named Baba Kahan predicted that a master would find him to give him initiation. Indeed, the venerated Baba Jaimal Singh Ji, also known as Baba Ji Maharaj, came to find his new disciple Sardar Sawan Singh Ji, eventually became Baba Ji's successor and the second Satguru of Radha Swami Satsang Vyas from 1903 until 1948. While promoting brotherhood and equality in a turbulent society through his many loving actions, Baba Sawan Singh Ji spiritually awakened many people through imparting the practice of Surat Shabd Yoga. Today, he is still loved and venerated as the Great Master. Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj was a disciple of the well-known master of Vyas, Hazur Maharaj Sawan Singh Ji. They met in 1924 in the ashram of Baba Sawan Singh Ji on the banks of the Vyas river. In the master, Kirpal Singh Ji recognized the luminous form he had seen during the 7 previous years in his meditation. Hazur Maharaj Sawan Singh Ji initiated him into the spiritual discipline of Surat Shabd Yoga, and from then on, Kirpal Singh Ji dedicated his life to reaching the summits of spirituality. Today, we have the opportunity to read a selection from a book authored by Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj and his beloved master Baba Sawan Singh Ji, entitled The Spiritual and Karmic Aspects of the Vegetarian Diet. This book comes as a gift from God to clarify and direct the right way of living concerning eating habits of a truth seeker, with food being a major part of our lives. the spiritual aspect of the vegetarian diet. Regarding laxity in the prescribed diet, I wish to say to all aspirants on the path that it is necessary, so long as one is in the physical body, that vegetarianism should be strictly adhered to. Any relaxation in the matter of diet would not only be a definite hindrance in meditation, but would unnecessarily contract karmic reaction. The real goal is to use every means possible to rise into full God consciousness. Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj. Vegetarian. Everyone seeks rest and peace, but they remain as elusive as ever. All our efforts in this direction come to naught and prove fruitless. Why? Because we work on the wrong lines. Man lives on two planes, the outer and the inner. First, we have to settle things outside before we can enter within to bring peace on the outer plane. There are three factors that count a great deal in this connection: right occupation, right conduct, right diet. The greatest purpose of human life is that one should know one's self and know God, and all the rest is mere dissipation. Sound mind in a sound body is a well-known aphorism. One has, therefore, to work for these before anything else. We have to keep both body and mind in a healthy condition before these can be used as instruments for spiritual advancement. For this, we have of necessity to resort to food. We cannot do without food for keeping the body and soul together. Our first and foremost problem then is food, for food conditions body as well as mind. Right type of food, rightly earned, rightly taken, helps a lot in this direction.
One must, therefore, earn his daily bread by the sweat of his brow, as the saying goes, and should not depend on others' earnings.
We must, for our livelihood, engage in some honest and useful pursuit, may be physical or mental, but it must be free from all guile, hypocrisy, ill will, and animosity, for karmic law is inexorable in its working. Every action leads to reaction, and thus the endless series rolls on interminably. Hence, the need for an honest living, howsoever poor it may be. Riches grow by the groans of the poor and the downtrodden, the hewers of wood and the drawers of water, and thrive on the livelihood of our fellow beings. We ought not, therefore, run after rich foods and dainty dishes, for these bring in their train much blood-sucking and are tainted with the untold miseries of the lowly, and, in the long run, make us miserable as well. All of us are being consumed in the invisible fires of hell, and yet know it not. Food, as you know, is made for man and not man for food. We have to make the best use of food like all the other things of life. One who is a slave of the palate cannot do anything useful. By a righteous control of the palate, we can control our entire physical and mental systems. A simple diet is more nourishing and wholesome and conducive to spiritual advancement than all the so-called delicacies which the modern culinary art provides. It will always give a comfortable feeling and serenity of mind and help you to live within your means, however limited the same may be, without extending your hand before others. When I was about to retire after my long government service, I was asked by my chief if I would like to have an extension. But I politely declined the offer, saying I do not want any extension, as I know how to arrange my affairs within the limited amount of my pension. We must partake a little below the saturation point of the appetite. When we get delicious foods, we are tempted to eat more than what is actually needed, and the extra food taken instead of giving extra health and energy proves baneful. The food which is not digested properly and assimilated in the system causes colic pains and aches. Do not overload the motor of your stomach, else you fall an easy prey to nausea. A surfeit of even what is good does prove harmful at times. A moderation in victuals and wines helps in the growth of vital powers in man. In the Puranas, there is an allegory of the food god complaining to Lord Vishnu, the sustainer of the universe, that people misused him a great deal. To this, Lord Vishnu humorously replied, "Those who eat you too much, you must eat them up, for that is the only remedy. Fresh air is the most essential part in our food. One must intake long breaths, retain them a while, and then exhale them out fully so as to cast out all the impurities of the body. Besides this, one must drink a lot of pure water and take fruit juices to flush the system through and through to make one clean. But avoid all types of spirituous liquors and intoxicants, for they render the mind and intellect morbid. Grains and fruits should form our normal and staple foods." Sheikh Sadi, a great mystic poet of Shiraz in Persia, always preached to divide the stomach into 4 compartments: 2 for filling with a limited quantity of simple diet, 1 for pure and clear water, while reserving 1 for the light of God. We read of an incident in the life of Hazrat Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. One day a physician came unto him and offered him his services for the sick and ailing in the Ummah, the Prophet's following. He remained there for about 6 months in idle indolence, as none of the Prophet's followers fell ill. He approached the Prophet and asked for his permission to leave, as no one there felt the need of his services. Hazrat Muhammad, with a gentle smile on his lips, said goodbye to the physician, saying, "So long as the congregation followed the instructions, there would be no chance of any of them falling sick, for they all lived by one panacea: to always eat a little less than what one may in his hunger otherwise like to take, to lead a chaste life with honest earnings." Baba Jaimal Singh Ji, a great master in his time, used to buy some loaves of bread or chapatis and wrap them in a piece of cloth and hang them on a branch of a tree. He would devote himself to meditation all the day long, and when he would get up from his samadhi, he would take just 1 loaf of bread, soak it in water, and partake of it before going into meditation again. Whole wheat bread is a complete food in itself. We deprive it of vital elements by removing the husk and by grinding the kernel into white flour by power-driven mills, and thus destroy the phosphorus and oil in the grains. I very often witnessed with my own eyes Hazur Baba Sawan Singh's food, which was always very simple and consisted of just a few wholesome items in very small quantities. All the saints live on a very frugal repast. So did Shams Tabrizi, a Muslim devotee, and Swami Shiv Dayal Singh Ji, both of whom lived by the principle eat less and remain happy. With a life of simple food and high thinking, coupled with high morals and chaste conduct, one needs no tonics which glut the market in these days. The luxurious food not only upsets the motor of the stomach but leads to dire consequences that at times prove very dangerous.
Very often, persons complain that they do not seem to progress on the path, but little do they realize that it is due to faulty diet and wrong living. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we read, lived mostly on barley bread.
We will now continue with the reading from Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj and his beloved master Baba Sawan Singh Ji's book entitled The Spiritual and Karmic Aspects of the Vegetarian Diet. In this part, we will learn about the essential principles which every human should follow to experience life and being loved by God as the Creator intended. The spiritual aspect of the vegetarian diet. We have all been created by God. All of us are embodied souls. Soul is of the same essence as that of God, and God is in all of us, and we should therefore love one another. That is what Saint Paul taught all his life. It is written in the Quran, O human beings, do good. Be good to your parents, relatives, orphans, the needy and the poor, your neighbors and your fellow beings. Such a life pleases Allah. Allah is within each one of us. The haughty who is selfish is not cared for by God. A master saint always enjoins love and reverence for all creation from the highest to the lowest, observance of non-violence even in the depths of the heart, truthfulness, non-injury to one's feelings by thoughts, words, symbols and deeds, kindly treatment towards all, cheery temperament, faith in the innate goodness in man, avoidance from giving bad names to others, non-indulgence in slanderous and amorous talk and idle pursuits. Avoid accusations, for they boomerang with greater intensity. If one is keen for God realization, then one must not hurt anyone's feeling, for heart is the seat of God. Have you ever realized that a mango seed, when embedded, gathers all the sweetness from the soil, while a pepper seeds attract all the bitterness in it? As a man thinks, so he becomes. Nothing is good or bad in the world, but our thinking makes it so. We, like the one or the other of the seeds, draw upon impulses from the atmosphere as suits our own mental makeup. We have in Mahabharata, the great epic poem of ancient India, that outer signs of a chaste and a clean life are good deeds. Just as a tree is known by the fruit it bears, so is a man by what he does. This is a great teaching of a great value. It helps a man to flourish and receive a good name both here and hereafter. He will be the friend of all creatures, for he resolves not to hurt or kill any of them, not even the humble bee nor the lowly ant. Such a person will surely know the truth one day. Prince Dhritarashtra, the son of Kuru, the mighty king of Bharat, once hurled a rebuke on Gandhiva, the mighty bow of Arjun, the Pandav prince. Arjun got angry and, touched to the quick, put his arrow on the Gandiv. Lord Krishna, who happened to be near at hand, asked Arjun what he was doing. Arjun replied that he, as a Kshatriya prince, had taken a vow that if anyone would but say a word against my mighty bow, I would not spare him. Lord Krishna said, O Arjun, could you tell me the fruit of dharma or righteousness? Is it pain or pleasure? Arjun replied that dharma or righteousness consisted only in the resultant love and harmony. So, one must first think of the result before doing or even contemplating any deed. It will certainly prolong one's span of life. A person with a virtuous life will never entertain any evil idea against any person and will never lose his temper and get excited. Such a one gets longevity in life. The life process is calculated by means of breaths. Normally, breathing is going on very rhythmically, some 10 to 12 per minute. But when a person is in a paroxysm of rage and is excited, he takes 20 to 23 breaths in a minute. Thus, there is a veritable truth hidden in the saying that good deeds or virtues prolong life, while evil deeds or vices shorten the span of one's life. Remember, you may even do meritorious deeds, but if you do not live a good moral life, you are nowhere. Try to live by the precept of the Master, and then alone your words can have weight with your friends. You cannot preach of chastity with lust in your heart and a leer in your eyes. You cannot dupe people for any length of time. Sooner or later, the cat will be out of the bag. The public cannot trust you blindly for long and take you at your face value. Excuse me, if I were to question as to why societies and preachers very often get a bad name, it is because they do not live by the teachings they preach to others. A godly person is possessed with a right mind and a right heart. He has both within and without a perfect spring of peace. His dealings are fair, open, and unquestionable. Truth springs from the very bottom of his heart. The audience is spellbound and gets a feeling of comfort by hearing him, as his utterances are drenched from the cooling effect of the loving and chaste thoughts within him, and everyone feels satisfied. A one among many, he stands as a tower of strength because of the purity of his heart. Lord Tennyson, a great poet, speaking of Sir Galahad, one of the knights of the Round Table, puts in his mouth the words, "My strength is like the strength of 10, because my heart is pure." It is said that out of the abundance of heart a man speaks. On the other hand, if a person is selfish and mischievous, he cuts with his own axe the tree of his life on which he sits with complacency. People dread to see his face and consider him an ominous being. If such a person goes anywhere, people shun him outright, even from a distance, and consider him an unlucky anathema. A righteous person, on the other hand, has his eyes on his weaknesses and through self-introspection weeds them out one by one. Swami Shiv Dayal Singh Ji advises that one should pick up his failures one by one and cast them out. All other saints have said this thing in the same strain. Love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you would wish them to do unto you. The whole of the religious philosophy hangs by these two cardinal principles. If one puts before him these two golden rules, his life will surely be transformed. The person who has no element of sympathy in his heart and a human touch is not fit to be called even a man, and he cannot know God. He who treats his enemies lovingly will disarm them in no time. In so far as you can, try to do no injury to anyone. Be good to all, and you will be at peace with yourself and be a radiating center of loving grace around you. The prayers of others to whom you may have done good will help you. The good thoughts of others will swarm around you with a benediction. The very idea of doing good will first affect you and will draw all good vibrations from the surrounding atmosphere. In a nutshell, we have just laid a Panchshila or 5 fundamental truths on which we can build the wonderful mansion of spirituality. These are non-violence in thought, word and deed, truthfulness, chastity, love for all and hatred for none, irrespective of position, wealth or learning, selfless service, physical and financial, and a willing share in the joys and sorrows of others. The living master cuts asunder the Gordian knot of an initiate. The disciple of the master refrains from sins. Those who will follow the above will enrich their lives here and hereafter. They will control their mind and outgoing faculties by coming in contact with the living word of God through the living master saint. Loving viewers, we appreciate your company for today's words of wisdom entitled The Spiritual and Karmic Aspects of the Vegetarian Diet by Sant Kirpal Singh and Baba Sawan Singh, Vegetarians Part 2 of 2. Coming up next is Faith Rivera, Spreading Love One Song at a Time, Part 2 of 2, right after noteworthy news. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television for more constructive programming. May your noble, exemplary way of life help to bring peace to all creatures in God's boundless grace.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule et suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule и suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Наши программы предлагают много языков. Пожалуйста, посмотрите suprememastertv.com/schedule и suprememastertv.com/WOW.